Welcome to the Board of Zoning Appeals. Members, staff, and guests, we ask for your patience during this virtual meeting. Multiple staff members are behind the scenes to make sure all applicants and citizens are able to communicate with the board at the appropriate times.
Board members and applicants are participating via Zoom. Some are using video and all are using audio. I will unmute applicants when their case is called. Everyone, please be aware of your audio and be mindful of anything in the background of your video to eliminate distractions. The public may participate in a number of ways. They can watch via City TV, email, phone, or log into publicinput.com. To watch, the public may stream the meetings through City TV, accessed at youtube.com/user/Columbia-SC-Government. So the link is here. It's also available on our website. Email, you can submit letters and statements to cocboardmeeting@columbiasc.gov leading up to and during the meeting, up until the time the case goes into board discussion. Staff will be monitoring that email during the meeting and we will read into the record. Phone, you may call in at 1-855-925-2801. Again, that's 1-855-925-2801. And when prompted, you'll enter the meeting code, which is 8946. Once you call in, you have three options. When you first call in, please press *1. That'll allow you to listen. If you're unable to stay on the line and you want to just record a voice message, you can hit *2. It'll give you 3 minutes to record a message that staff will play into or read into the record. Once your case is called, so when I announce your case, if you would like to speak on that case, you may hit *3, and that places you in a queue to speak live when prompted. The reason we ask you to wait until your case is called to hit *3 is it does not let us know on our side what case you are there for. So just to make sure we patch you in on the correct matter. And you can hit the star option anytime during the call. You can also stream at publicinput.com/COCBoza-June 2020. So, and also please make sure if you're listening on your phones that you mute on your computer. So, because if you are on your phone and you call in and you have it on the background, it's going to give us feedback on our side and we're not going to be able to hear you. So again, if you're on the phone, listen to the audio on your phone and mute your computer, please. And again, there is an audio delay. So if you see that I am pausing on this end, this is more for everybody on Zoom. I will pause every once in a while. And it's just to make sure public input has the chance to catch up. So we make sure we get any calls or any feedback that we need to play into the record. And I'll go ahead and do roll call. Mr. Sally?
Here.
Mr. Dinkins? You might be muted, Mr. Dinkins.
He's on mute.
Let me see. Mr. Dinkins?
Here.
There you are. All right. Mr.
Okay,
Primus?
good. Thank you.
Say again?
I'm just calling roll. You're here. All right.
Here.
Mr. Speed?
Here.
Miss Stevens?
Here.
Mr. Schaefer?
Here.
Mr. Gregory?
Here.
We have a quorum. All right, Chuck?
Applicants with requests before the Board of Zoning Appeals are allotted a presentation time of 10 minutes. This time should include, but is not limited to, an overview of the project, case history, and any meetings held regarding their requests. This time also includes all persons presenting information on behalf of the applicants, such as attorneys, engineers, and architects. This time limit does not include any questions asked by the Board of Zoning Appeals or staff regarding requests. Any member of the general public may address the board in intervals of 3 minutes or 5 minutes if a spokesperson for an established body, 3 or more people. The applicant will then have 5 minutes for rebuttal. The board reserves the right to amend these procedures on a case-by-case basis.
All right, and we'll move forward to our consent agenda. The board uses the consent agenda to approve non-controversial or routine matters by a single motion and vote. If a member of the board or the public wishes to discuss an item that's on the consent agenda, that item is removed and placed on the regular agenda. The board then approves the remaining consent agenda items. The first matter on the consent agenda is the approval of the May 7th, 2020 minutes. And we have case 2020-0026 for 403 South Waccamaw Avenue. This is a special exception to permit a detached single-family residence. And that is all that is on the consent agenda. So, and again, that's a detached single-family residence in a commercial district.
Okay. Is there anyone in the audience or on the board that would like the Waccamaw removed from the consent agenda?
Andrew, do you have anything on your end?
Hi, Rachel, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, apologies, the thing was lagging.
Yeah.
I do not see anyone that wishes to speak on the consent agenda.
All right, and I can say that we received no letters to the COC board meeting on this as well, Chuck.
Excellent. In that case, I will accept a motion.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the previous meeting's minutes, as well as make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Excellent. All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Is anyone opposed?
All right, since it seems to be unanimous, I won't go through the roll call.
Okay.
All right, so, and just so that she knows, I believe the applicant for 403 South Waccamaw was on here. You are welcome to log off now. You don't have to stay through the entire meeting. If you're welcome to, but you don't have to.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Have a good night.
Uh-huh.
All right, next we have the regular agenda, and I believe both Mr. Dinkins and Ms. Stevens wanted to address the board before we got started with item number 5 and 6. So we'll start with Ms. Stevens.
Sure. I am recusing myself on this vote, and I wanted to explain why. I received a text message on May 21st from Deborah Thomas, who is the mother of a childhood friend of mine, asking me to call her. And when I did, Ms. Thomas indicated she was calling about this project, the 2 items on the agenda right here. And I immediately cut her off and told her I couldn't speak to her about it because doing so might require my recusal. She persisted in attempting to discuss the matter, indicating her disapproval of the project and asked me to come to her house to see it from her backyard. I declined and told her I would discuss the matter or would consider the matter like all others in front of me, and encouraged her to attend this meeting and participate through formal channels. She continued relaying her concerns about the project and the interactions she had with the developer and other people about this matter. I did not respond to those statements and again tried to end the conversation. After I called Boza's staff for guidance and was advised recusal would be appropriate due to the ex parte nature of this communication. And I am sending a written copy of this statement to staff for inclusion in the record as my formal explanation for declining to participate. And I'd also like to note my personal frustration with having to recuse myself on this in light of the fact that I now see in the written materials that Ms. Thomas has sent a letter of support for this project. So I'm going to turn my video off now.
All right, thanks, Ms. Stevens. All right, Mr. Dinkins.
Yes, I would just like to point out to the board, make the board aware of the fact that Cox and Dinkins was hired by the developer to survey this property, as I assume for part of the closing a few months ago, but we have had zero interaction with them regarding any potential project, and I don't have any interest in the property and no future work on the property planned whatsoever. I just wanted to be as transparent as I can and just alert that fact to the board. I do not plan to recuse myself from this discussion unless anyone on the board, and I'm asking and bringing this to their attention, has a problem with me being a part of this discussion.
I do not personally have a problem at all. I think you would be actually very helpful to be part of the discussion today. So I hope you will do so.
Is there anyone with concerns?
No, I would just echo what Chuck said. I don't have a problem with it and appreciate the transparency, and just, I just ask him to, keep an open mind with the presentation and how he wants to vote on the matter.
Did the staff make a recommendation about this recusal?
No. So I had just said if he wanted to just share it with you all and get your feedback, he was welcome to. So I guess I can share. I don't see a conflict here, but I did think transparency was best. But if it made anyone uncomfortable, that was kind of we just wanted to share it with the board.
I don't have any problem with it. I don't have any problem as well. I appreciate the transparency.
Yeah, this is Josh. I don't have a problem whatsoever. Again, I guess transparency here is asked. So.
All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Dinkins, and everybody. We'll move forward.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So we will use the following outline for the regular agenda items. I will introduce the case. Applicant will have 10 minutes to make presentation, and the board may ask questions. The question and answer time won't count against the applicant's presentation. The public will then turn to the public, and they'll be allowed to participate via email, voicemail, or phone comment. An applicant will have 5 minutes for rebuttal at the end of the public comment section. And then we will go into board discussion and any action by board. So the next two cases are for the same properties. We have item number 5, which is case 2020-0027, a special exception, or it's at 2809 and 2901 Rosewood Drive. This is a special exception to permit multifamily use within a commercial district. We also have item number 6, case 2020-0028, for the same address, 2809 and 2901 Rosewood Drive, special exception to permit a shared parking arrangement for a mixed-use development. These are two separate requests and will require two separate motions. And speaking with the applicant, we had discussed kind of breaking them up. But I know members of the board have asked how we can really break them up because there's going to be a lot of overlap with public comment on these. So it is at the board's discretion whether you would like to discuss these with the applicant combined and then make two separate motions, or if you would like to find a way to split these up to where we talk about the multifamily use first and the shared parking second. So again, that is up to your discretion. You can let me know and the applicant know how you'd like to have that discussion.
I guess we're in a board discussion now. I personally would much prefer to discuss everything together, the multifamily special exception as well as the parking special exception. I just think it's going to be a waste of time to do one and then rehash the same thing again on the other when we can get everything, I think, handled in one motion, then vote on it separately.
I would 100% agree with that. It's going to be impossible to separate the discussion. I think it's totally appropriate to make two different motions and two votes, but the discussion will overlap so much that I 100% agree.
All right.
Yeah, this is Josh. I agree with that. I think there's going to be a lot of repetition. So I agree with doing it together as well.
I have a question that's tangential. Is this an appropriate time to ask that, Rachel?
Just before I got to ask the hearing both cases.
Well, I just am curious. I just have a general question as to why these two properties aren't two separate applications.
They are two separate applications. So, but just in turning it over to the applicant to present and for the public comment, I fear there's going to be overlap.
No, I understand that the special exceptions are two different applications. I'm asking why two properties separated by a state road are not two separate applications.
You don't have to divide it up into two separate applications. So you can have multiple addresses on the same application when it's a cohesive development.
Even when they're not adjacent properties divided by a street?
Even when they're divided by a street, you can do that. So a mixed use development can have that division.
Okay, thank you. I just needed that clarification.
No problem. All right. Well, if you all don't have any other questions, I will turn it over to the applicant. I believe Mr. Kaysen's on here. Let me make sure you're not muted.
I think I'm good. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Thank you very much. And I appreciate y'all's time this afternoon hearing us on this case. It's one that we both recognize there's a lot of differing opinions on, but also are excited about the potential and opportunities for what can be done that we believe to be a benefit to the existing property, as well as a catalyst to Rosewood to continue all that's happened over there, and be a catalyst for future growth. This just a little bit of background. My name is Frank Kaysen. I'm president of the Kaysen Development Group. We are a locally based real estate development company. A team of 5 of us. Our offices are in the Cottontown area. We've done some redevelopment projects. We currently have projects going on around the town. We are focused on opportunistic projects inside of the city and primarily retail focused outside of the city. We currently have projects going on here in Rosewood, on Main Street, 5 Points, and Forest Acres. We've been excited about the discussions here since we've started. I thought it would be helpful just to give a little bit of history on this particular site and project. This Rosewood Baptist Church has been here for about 80 years. It was at one time one of the largest churches in the city, one of the largest Baptist churches for sure, and first structure which is still standing in place on the properties in the middle of the site and was built in the 40s. The additional buildings were built in the 70s, which is when the new sanctuary, or the existing sanctuary, was built. It's now 50 years old. A lot of people have reached out to us since this project's been announced, and shared a lot of stories about this church, a lot of history amongst families, etc. One person relayed that it was a number of people, relayed this a big drop-off spot for the 2015 flood. The church has their attendance and membership have continued to drop down over the past number of years. New pastor has come in 5-6 years ago, and numbers dropped and have now started turning back around. But they recognize that these facilities were really built for probably closer to a 1,000-member church, and they have about 80 to 100. So every building structure is 2 stories, and it's become a burden on them to bear the cost of it. So they recognize that they want to stay in the community. They want to stay in Rosewood. It's called Rosewood Church. And I believe a couple of those members, a couple of leadership folks are on this call. I'm sure we'll say something at some point. This was put on the market for sale. There were a number of bidders. They can weigh in a little more details on this. A number of people who had interest. As you all know, it's zoned C3 general commercial. So they had a number of different types of developers. Our plan was to keep and renovate and restore the existing buildings on the church campus property, and then what is currently their gym, which we'll refer to as the gym parcel. Our plans were to add new retail over there, and our vision resonated with them, so we have been under contract with them. We actually already own the gym parcel that we closed on a number of months ago. So we have been working on this for some time. With that said, it's still, as you all know, it's still relatively early in the process. So there's only so much design and engineering work that has been or can be done to this point before we continue through the process. Some of the discussion on the process, I've seen a number of letters and heard a lot of comments about that we have not reached out to people. Deborah Thomas's name was already mentioned, and we've had probably 15 or 20 conversations with her, and appropriately so. She is one of the closest neighbors to the property, as well as when we approached her starting in November. I'm sorry to single her out, but she was the president of the Shannon Neighborhood Council. So we reached out to her as both the president of the Neighborhood Council and as a very close adjoining property owner. If you're looking at the site plan, it's in the back right side, the Holly Street side. So we felt that we need to reach out to people early on this and get a read, but also knew there was a balance between reaching out to people early, and this was 6 months ago, 7 months ago, with the balance being how much can we share at this stage and with how many people. So we reached out to Deborah as the president of the Neighborhood Association. We reached out to Matt Markham, the president of the Rosewood Merchants Association, and the president of the Rosewood Neighborhood Association as well, Tim Malson. And all of those were in November of last year, and shared our project and our vision and what our thoughts were. And every one of those conversations was very positive, and they were very supportive of the project. As discussed, and I don't think she would mind me saying, Deborah was highly favorable to it. She then got into a period where she had some more concerns. We met with her and talked through a lot of those, including meetings with our landscape architect and our engineers on site to come up with buffer solutions. As you've seen, I believe you've seen your packet, she has then submitted a personal letter of support, not in her role as former president of Shannon Neighborhood Council. We have since spoken to, once the project started getting more steam, we spoke to Rachel Bailey in advance of our submittal and had discussions on the process as well as our shared parking matrix and the shared parking concept. Our architect Scott Garvin and Alex Sojourner with Garvin Design Group. They might be on the call as well, I believe. And Hoyt Burnett and Lamp Lane Group South, our engineers. We all got on a phone call to discuss how to make this work, and not how to force it in, but how to make a mixed-use project work on two parcels that, as George mentioned, are separated by a street, but are very closely connected, and actually have been for a long time. Same ownership and cross-access parking, because there's currently no parking on the church site. So we've met with the neighbor who owns the property on the west side of the Rosewood Market. I'm sure everyone's familiar with, as well as the Rosewood Market owner, two separate people, and had very positive conversations with them very early on. We have met with a number of residents on Sloan and Bernie, and did not meet with all of them. The person did say that. We met with and spoken to as many as we could, and tried to address a lot of concerns. We had our first Zoom call with the Sloan Street residents and Bernie residents, as many as could make it. This was 12 or 13 days ago. This was Monday of last week. And had some good discussions and heard a lot of their concerns, and attempted to address those concerns. And Councilman Brennan and Duvall were both on that call. This was on Memorial Day evening. That was about an hour and 45-minute call. And at the end of that call, council members were both put on the spot, what they felt about the project. Both said on that call they were supportive of the project, albeit with some further discussion and insight. We then had a call with Shannon Neighborhood Council the next night. It was Tuesday of last week. That call was 2.5 hours, and heard a lot of similar things and concerns on that call. And then a working group, a smaller group of people was put together, recommended by Councilman Brennan on a Monday call. We met with that group on Thursday after the call last week. We met with individual property owners on the northwest side of the property, the Sloan Street neighbor on the north side of the existing building retail parcel, and worked through some concerns with them. That's the Wilms. I believe they also have submitted a letter. They first submitted a letter of opposition and then submitted another one in support. We had a working meeting on Thursday of last week with the group. And then one of the kind of the main point of contacts there might be on the call. The representative might be on the call as well. Been working through a lot of discussions with them ever since. Point of this long rant is that we have not spoken to everyone in the neighborhood, and have certainly not addressed every person's concerns. We have had a lot of conversations on this and attempted to hear, to listen, and hopefully make some attempt at explaining our concept more. It seems like there was a lot of false information out there, as well as a lot of misunderstanding of both our project and the process. So what is the project? Our plans are to take the existing buildings on the church campus, and it's about a little over 50,000 square feet, and convert those to 55,000 square feet, convert it to 43 units, adding parking on that site. All of that would be in the front and on the left side of the site, and then adding a new building on the gym parcel I believe y'all have renderings of that. Those new structures, that would be a 2-story building with what you see in the parking matrix would be 4 residential units above that. So that's how you get to the 47 units. And then about 8,000 square feet of retail, restaurant, office space. Where we planned, the painted white building that you see in those renderings is a pretty massive renovation of what is currently a very fairly unattractive building in the back of the property. So the idea would be to reuse that structure as well. And so to the point of the shared parking, our intent was to add retail and residential. So it could be that we add some office here as well, but the target would probably be more retail. We did not come up with this on our own. Y'all are probably familiar with even the spreadsheets that you see there. It's based on a combination of a ULI parking study from a 200-page parking manual and a project that I believe this similar board of zoning appeals approved on Divine Street that the estates company did. I'm not trying to suggest that these projects are the same, only just for reference, point of reference that we didn't want to recreate the wheel with this, but we wanted to also provide for a somewhat unique shared parking scenario where we could the residential units, their peak times for parking are different than the retail. That's an oversimplification, I understand, but in the essence of time, that was our thought process on that. We heard over the last 10, 12 days a lot of concerns about the concerns that we have heard have been about traffic and parking. So, and many people asked about a traffic study. As many of you probably know, at this level, this stage, we typically not get a traffic study done, and a traffic study is not required yet. It may be required by DOT, but we did engage a traffic engineer. We asked them to come up with something as quick as they could, not throwing it together, but something to measure what the traffic would be here, so that there was a third-party view on this, not ours. So that was provided to Rachel earlier. Rachel, is that everybody's packet?
Yeah, and I'm sharing it on my screen now too. At least the graphic from it, but they received the handout too.
Okay, I can't see that.
Can you not see my screen?
I cannot see that. Okay, yeah, thank you.
So, and just as a note, sorry to interrupt you, Mr. Kaysen, but the 10-minute time limit is passed. I just wanted to check in with the board if you would like to give some extra time.
I would. I've got some questions real quick before we go to comments.
Okay, I think Mr. Kaysen might have had a little bit more presentation to give, so that's why I was just asking if he needed.
I'm good. I'm sorry.
Okay. All right.
I mean, but we've combined 2 into 1, right?
Right.
So he's allowed to 20 minutes, really.
Yeah, he had 15 just because I didn't want to cut him off.
Oh, good. All
right.
Let me take
5 more minutes then.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
So I guess one question was that in the application, it looked like that there was a house that was behind it that was outlined in blue, and then in all the plans later submitted, that's not part of it. Is that what's going on with that? Is that just a mistake, or is that part of the property that's not going to be developed, or what's the deal with that? And then my second question, just so you have it, is what are the plans for the sanctuary?
Yeah.
I can speak to the plans outlined in blue. That street view is old. I'm sorry, I did not catch that. That is from March of 2019. Since that time, the parcel has been subdivided out so that that house is its own separate parcel now. It is no longer on the same parcel as the church. So I apologize. That's an outdated image.
Yeah, and that parcel was owned by the church.
Yeah.
And as part of their efforts to meet their budget needs, they sold that off. It's owned by I think an entity in California. It's a rental unit right now.
So, and that's why that parcel has a little bit of split zone on it. When that house was carved out, they kept a little bit of an L shape, and that's what falls into that single family and community character portion. Just at the back, there's a little L. I can show you here. The little jut out, that's from where that house was carved out. So that's that little portion of the split zone, in case you noticed on the summary that there were a few other zoning districts thrown in with the C3. That's that little portion that's mixed zoning.
While we're talking about that, then what is the little L, the thing that sticks out into the RS3?
Yes, it is RS3 community character, and that's just the little part of it. It was always a split zone parcel when it was a full parcel with that house, and then when they carved the house off, it left a little bit of that RS3 on the remaining church parcel.
It's that little sliver was retained because the church's HVAC system is on that, but which will be demoed and moved, and our units will be on the roof. The other question was sanctuary.
Yep.
A lot of discussions on that. I don't know what to do with that. We've had a lot of input, a lot of neighborhood input on what could or should be done with that, from we shouldn't touch it to it should be torn down to event venue. We don't run event venues, and I do that. I give our architects an incredible amount of credit. They've designed, actually, I think those drawings are also in your packet, a rendering of the interior, converting those to apartments. So those would be converted to apartments as well.
So that's part of the 44 apartments in there?
That's part of the 43 on the
43, okay.
Campus side, yep. Yeah, actually, go back one, Rachel. There it is. That's the sanctuary.
Gotcha.
The Garvin design team did an incredible job with that.
So the way that you're currently accounting for that square footage is in your residential count.
That's correct. Exactly.
Okay.
Frank, did I read in your packet? I don't know if I heard you address it, but is there a proposed restaurant on the site?
So thank you for that. That's a good question. That's the way that I guess the best way to answer that is that document is, Rachel, correct me where I'm off on this, but that document's meant to be a workable document that really be administered by the zoning administrator, where when we have that user, so a restaurant user was what we presented, for a portion of the space, that we would, the numbers would look like that, what we presented. So what we presented was maybe not, max would be all restaurant space. I think we all know that's unrealistic. But what we presented was what we felt was a fairly conservative or higher end estimate where it could be or end up being. In other words, we didn't include any office space, which would have dropped those numbers down if we put an office user in there.
Yeah, understood.
Does that make sense?
It does. It does.
Yeah, staff had advised prior to submission to kind of come in with the most intense uses and highest parking that could go on that parcel, because if the demand goes down, it would not have to come back to you all because it would be less intense. But if it went up, the matter would have to come back before you. So that was why it was suggested of just make sure to include the most intense uses that you could envision on the site.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Other questions?
Anyone else have any questions before I? Andrew, do we have anyone on the phone?
Hi, Rachel. Yes, I do have currently 2 callers that have indicated they wish to speak, and I'll take this opportunity to remind people that if they do wish to get in the queue to speak, they should press *3, or they can leave a voicemail by pressing *2. But I will continue to the first speaker right now.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Bob Morgan. I'm the pastor at Rosewood Church. I want to thank you for giving us an opportunity to come and speak in favor of what Mr. Cason is doing. We've had multiple opportunities when we started looking at having to sell this property. Nobody's wanted to do this, but it just basically comes down to you can't live in a house you can't afford. And we have some plans that we're staying in the Rosewood community as a church. Rosewood Church is going to be here. It started in 1937, and we're not going anywhere except just down the road, not even a half mile down the road to a different facility. I wanted to bring before you the situation we've heard several times. I've sat in on a lot of these calls and meetings where we've heard people talk about wanting to extend this or have this put down the road, and I wanted to speak specifically to how that affects us as the church and the ministry aspects of that. In business, time is money, but in ministry, time is mission. And we know we can't afford to stay here, so we've taken the action to be able to move. And the longer we stay here, we're basically staying in a home we can't afford. We have bills that pile up, and it would amaze you, the water and power alone in a facility this large, even with mostly everything cut off, are still well beyond our fiscal picture. So we made the decision to do this. We had our congregation vote. They passed to sell it. We put it on the market. We had the opportunity to do several things, but having done this, and made this decision, we just know that the longer we stay here, the more it takes, and we're caused to stay here. It takes money away from our food pantry where we're feeding disenfranchised and outplaced people. It takes away from the homeless ministries that we've currently started working with Keeping It Real Ministries in town. It puts us in a position where our current outreach for Celebrate Recovery of people with addictions, these things that are financed by mission, also cost money, and every dime we have to spend towards the facility pulls away from the ministry where we actually get to help people in our community. So I just wanted to come out and kind of bring that to the forefront that, time is it might be money in the business world, but in the church world, time is missions, and we need to be able to move this to financially and respectfully honor the tithes, offerings, and giving that people give to our church. So I just wanted to thank you for your time and kind of put that in your ear and know how much we're ready to get onto our new location, but we can't move forward until this project comes to pass. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, and now the next caller.
Okay.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, my name is Harry Langley. I'm the business administrator for the church, and I've been here since 2011. I just wanted to speak for a few moments on where we are in this situation. I came on board as a member of the church in 2015 to help Pastor Bob transition the church to be a little bit more neighborhood friendly and also try to grow it a little bit younger. When I first got here, most of the population in this church congregation was older. They didn't work with the neighborhood at all. The neighborhood Merchants Association had a crawfish festival that they would run the sprinkler system on. And we changed that mentality within the church over several years. And as we did that, we lost some of the older congregation. We brought in newer people. But unfortunately, as we've transitioned, we've also not been able to grow our tithes. And so we have this monster church that holds about 300 to 400 people in the sanctuary with about 60 people in the congregation. And so we just need to downsize. And I just want to say that as we got into a situation where we had to sell the church, first of all, we didn't want to do it. It was the very last moment that we had to take it to the congregation. But by the time we took it to the congregation, we were in a desperate situation. And Mr. Kaysen, I'm just going to say this flat out, has been a dear friend of this church. There would be no ministry at all taking place in this church if Mr. Kaysen had not come along when he did. And so I just want to tell him how much we appreciate what he's done here at Rosewood. But we don't want to leave the Rosewood and the Shannon area. We want to stay in this area. When we first put it up for bid and started looking at it, we had projects coming in. I know one of them was a gas station. I don't know what they all were, but they were all both. Mr. Kaysen's group was the only one who took both sides of the project together. And in addition to just demoing everything, he was looking at keeping our church together as a building, which I think would have been helpful for a lot of our older people who are still in the neighborhood and not want to see this building bulldozed. So we felt like when we looked at all the different projects, we also felt like this was the best project for the neighborhood because we're still part of the neighborhood. And we didn't want to leave the neighborhood left with a gas station in the corner. So I just wanted to share that as what our motivation was. We would prefer, obviously, not have to sell this building. But when you walk into a sanctuary that holds 300 people with 60 people in it, it looks like you're a dead and dying church. And we're moving down the road to a small Lutheran church that holds about 100 people, so we look like we're live. And some people in the neighborhood say, well, what difference does it make if you delay it for a month? Well, we have a contract on that Lutheran church right now. It's 60-day due diligence, 30-day close. We have exercised our COVID-19 clause to give us more time, but we do know that there are people who are actively wanting that church. And if we don't do something sooner rather than later, then Mr. Kaysen, by the time he gets this building, we may not have a place to go to at all. So, but I just wanted to say those things, and I appreciate your time and your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and now another speaker.
Okay.
I apologize for the delay. I'll return to that speaker. I'm going to try someone else right now.
Okay.
Hi, good afternoon. This is Kathleen McDaniel. I'm an attorney for Leah Dobrinshore and Adam Shore. They, I believe, have submitted some information to you in the packet expressing their concerns about the development project. And I just wanted to let the board know that as of about 3 seconds before we got on this call, that we've reached an agreement in principle with Mr. Kaysen and his development group that addresses their concerns. We've almost got it reduced to writing, and we'll get that done later this evening or tomorrow and get that signed. And that will be a private agreement between my clients and the development group that, address their concerns about parking and some of the other issues that will provide some more protections for the neighborhood. And we really appreciate Mr. Kaysen's quick, responsive, hard work on putting that together.
All right, thanks, Kathleen.
Mm-hmm.
And just to
All right.
confirm,
Now another speaker. Oh,
sorry, just to confirm,
I apologize.
she was the attorney for the property 2 doors down from this, 2 parcels down for the shores at 214.
Yes, for the shores.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Go
Sorry,
ahead, Andrew.
Okay, here's the next speaker.
Hi, I hope you can hear me this time. Can you confirm that for me?
Yes, we can hear you. Can you introduce yourself for us?
Okay, great. Thank you. I'd be glad to. My name is Cully Salahi. I live on Bernie Drive, where Sloan ends into Bernie. Thank you to the Board of Zoning Appeals for hearing our concerns today. As I said, we live on Bernie, and we've been carefully attuned to the proposed development of Rosewood Church, which we first heard about on May 14th when the signs went up outside. We're very invested in a smart, well-designed, and carefully thought-out development going there. And the initial proposals for exception shared by Case and Development Group, they brought many questions and concerns from the neighbors here in Shandon. In fact, as you know, the Shandon Neighborhood Council held a special meeting to address the proposed development, and we were told that that was the most attended meeting to date. So clearly there's abundant investment and interest from the residents of Shandon in this issue. Several neighbors and I have agreed to form a working group with Mr. Kaysen at this point to address the concerns brought forth by residents, including the effects this development will have on traffic, pedestrian safety, and noise, trash, litter, light pollution onto the neighboring residential blocks. So at this point, we have met with Mr. Kaysen for a walkthrough at the church, but we are still awaiting information that Mr. Kaysen has stated that he's actively pursuing regarding parking numbers, traffic impacts, and possible adjustments to the retail and residential ratios, in particular the possibility of Sloan Street becoming a cul-de-sac, which has been much discussed, and it seems like it would be beneficial for both Mr. Kaysen and the neighbors on Sloan and Bernie who would be affected by the development. So at this point, I would request to you, the Board of Appeals, that you do not grant the proposed exceptions today. Simply because we are still waiting traffic studies and further discussion with Mr. Kaysen. Right now, Sloan is a quiet residential street. Bernie Drive houses 20 children alone just between Maple and Holly. So we are very pro-development, but we also need for any development going in there to be responsible and well-researched. So we're hopeful that we, the neighbors, and Mr. Kaysen can come to a consensus and a plan that's supported by the neighborhood. And while I believe that that is possible in the near future, we're not there yet today. So please defer approval until a later date so that we can continue this newly developed positive working relationship with Mr. Kaysen. I'm going to hand the phone to my husband, who would like to add a comment as well, please.
Hi, this is Todd Mathis on Bernie Drive. I just wanted to reply to the pastor's statement about the church contract. When we had the meeting with Mr. Kaysen stated that the contract with the church was not contingent upon the zoning board's ruling. So I'm not sure why that would have anything. I understand he can support it, but I don't think that it has anything to do or wasn't contingent upon the zoning board's ruling, according to what he said. So anyway, thank you for your time, and
thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I do have a few more speakers. Here's the next one.
Hello, I'm Tom Farr. I also live on Bernie. Can you hear me?
Yes, hello.
Hey, I've got issues also with driving, traffic study. Right now, Bernie's already gotten to be pretty busy as a cut through. And why would someone try to bother to go Rosewood to get to Hardin when they can just shoot straight from Bernie with one stop sign on Woodrow. And we've already having traffic issues with people speeding as it is as a cut through. So I really think a traffic study should be performed first before you take a vote on whether to approve these two variances. And the other issue I have is I just don't quite get this shared parking. The number of spots are to be 88, and yet you're going to have 47 apartments. And why would those 47 apartments not need, I think the traffic study said 1.3 cars, but possibly 2 cars per apartment. If you're selling this for young professionals, odds are they're going to be a couple who both are going to be working, both have cars, plus they're going to have visitors over. And so how do you squeeze retail, office, plus 47 apartments into 88 spots? I think the traffic's going to be a lot larger than is being proposed. And how are you going to make sure someone's not in their apartment for it to be used for retail or vice versa? So I don't think it should be voted on today.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Right.
Here's the next speaker.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey, this is Thomas Mann. I'm also a Bernie resident. I sent a letter to the board, email earlier today, but just as a disclaimer, I know Frank Kaysen. I know his family. I go to church with Frank Kaysen. He has done some wonderful work in the city for improvements, and I think that he's the right guy for this project. But I am in opposition to this concept that he's presented based on the idea of shared parking. A lot of what Mr. Fryer has said, I've gotten the worksheets for the parking situation, and I mean, I know you can prove anything with numbers if you want to, but it's a common sense approach that I'm taking. If let's say there are 19 single bedroom residences that have 1 car, and then you have 28 residences that have 2 cars. That's 75 spaces, and they only have 38 around the building apartment complex there. You need 37 additional spaces. And the idea, I think, with shared parking is that, well, people will go to work and people can come and the restaurant, retail, whatever, and then they'll leave or close, and the residents will come back and find their parking spaces again. That's asking a lot for human behavior. That might work if everybody has rules and somebody enforces the rules. Who would enforce that? I think the board, you may already know this, it'd be wise to find out whether this has worked before and if it's been successful, because I don't think we want to get into the situation and realize, oh, that was just a bad idea. I think that it has merit, but I don't think it's that number of 47 apartments that, and also know that I have had discussions with Jason quite, and he knows these concerns already. But I do have an important one about safety. I was at Publix grocery store a while back. I witnessed a girl jaywalking across Rosewood at 4 lanes. And a highway patrolman, a state highway patrolman who doesn't patrol that per se, saw that, and he stopped her. He blue lighted her as a pedestrian and was going to give her a citation, and she was actually arguing why she couldn't do that. And he says it's against the law and it's dangerous. And so I think what we're setting up a situation that if I am a resident there and I come home and I can't find a parking place on Sloan Street where there's parking, or down in front of somebody's house on Sloan Street, or around the corner on Bernie, I may end up going to the public parking lot and just parking my car there and then jaywalking across the road. I think that is a shortcut. I think it would be human nature to try to do that. I think it would happen, and I think it is unsafe and I think that we're setting up a situation for an injury.
All right. Thank you,
so-
sir. That was the 3 minutes. Thank you.
Well, that's why I'm opposed to it as planned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Rachel, as of right now, I do not have any callers that have indicated they wish to speak. However, I do have several emails that I have received.
I'll let you start with
I
the
can go ahead and read
emails,
those.
and then I'll take over with the emails I have, but you may go first.
Okay. The first one is from Dr. Tia and Mr. Seth Anderson. And it reads, "Good afternoon. My family lives on the 2800 block of Burney Drive. As a parent of 3 small children, we are deeply concerned with the scale of the proposed apartment complex and the inevitable increase in traffic to our quiet residential street. We agree with the letter from the Sloan/Burney residents that was written and submitted by Leah Doburn Shore and Adam Shore. Sincerely, Dr. Tia and Mr. Seth Anderson." I have 2 from Debbie Windsor Fryer. I'll read them together. They're not very long. The first one reads, "You keep referring to this project as in Rosewood, but according to the boundaries for Shandon, which are from Divine, Blossom to Kilbourne and up to Rosewood Drive, the church is not located in Rosewood, but in the Shandon neighborhood. Rosewood neighborhood starts on the other side of Rosewood Drive. All commercial buildings located in Shandon are 1 story and not 2 stories. This development will add more cut-through traffic on Burney Drive, as most people try to avoid Rosewood Drive and use Burney to speed through to Hardin Street. Not only that, it will decrease the property values of the homes in the neighborhood. Debbie Windsor Fryer." And the next one is short. It says, "As a Burney resident, we knew nothing about this call or these calls, nor were we notified of any calls to discuss our concerns. We received no notice or letter. Debbie Windsor Fryer." There's also one from Bob Admonson on Laurie Lane, and it reads, "How can traffic impact be determined if the developer has not nailed down use? Restaurants will have more of a traffic impact and at different times than office space. I generally support this project, but I'm concerned that awarding a special exception is a high bar and a more thorough traffic study should be completed. Bob Edmondson." And my final email is fairly long, so bear with me here. It is from Terry Kellen, a City of Columbia resident, and it reads, "For all the reasons listed below, Boza cannot approve the above referenced application for special exception because they do not meet the requirements as set forth in the City of Columbia Municipal Code. Deficiencies preventing the multifamily special exception from being approved as submitted. 1, the subject property is part of the Shandon CC Overlay District, and as the purpose of this overlay district is to preserve community character, applicant must demonstrate that its request meets the community character criteria in addition to the special exception criteria, but neither the application nor the Boza case summary includes this information. 2, application describes the project as a collection of retail, office, restaurant, and residential uses, but does not specify the types of residential uses. Said admission does not provide the information necessary for Boza to make a determination as to whether the project will substantially adversely affect traffic, adjoining properties, aesthetic character, or public safety. 3, the application does not reference the number of bedrooms in each unit. This may not be required when a proposed development is conforming, but it is essential information needed to meet the minimum criteria of a special exception because it is fundamental in determining whether there will be a substantial adverse impact with regard to density and whether this high impact property will adversely affect traffic, adjoining properties, aesthetic character, or public safety. 4, the application does not reference the height, number of stories, and size of the buildings and other structures. These substantially impact density. How can Boza determine if the application request meets the minimum criteria for a special exception, i.e. not substantially adversely affecting traffic, adjoining properties, aesthetic character, or public safety without this information? 5, will a condition of any special exception, if approved now, require full compliance with all other zoning requirements, or will future variances or special exceptions be allowed? Since the special application is silent as to specifics for the various uses, once a special exception is made, that doesn't restrict future requests for variances or special exceptions. A slippery slope is created by this piecemeal approach to zoning. As the special exception criteria do not allow Boza to vary requirements as to section 17-267, mid-rise residential structures, or section 17-269, drink establishments, or section 17-270, restaurants, the lack of information as to the type of structures and specific uses would render Boza unable to determine whether the project will be otherwise conforming. This information about the project/use is essential to Boza making a determination as to the true impact of this project on traffic, adjoining properties, aesthetic character, or public safety, and whether it will have a substantial adverse impact on these. 6, no evidence is provided to support the application's contention that a mixed-use development enhances neighborhoods, which are included in the Shandon CC Overlay District or the Rosewood neighborhood. And it continues, deficiencies preventing the parking special application from being approved as submitted. 1, application describes the project as a collection of retail, office, restaurant, and residential uses, but does not specify the types of residential uses. Said omission does not provide the information necessary for Boza to make a determination as to whether the project will substantially adversely affect traffic, adjoining properties, aesthetic character, or public safety. 2, the subject property is part of the Shandon CC Overlay District, and as the purpose of this overlay district is to preserve community character, applicant must demonstrate that this request meets the community character criteria in addition to the special exception criteria, but neither the application nor the Boza case includes this information. Staff comments in the case summary say the city's traffic engineer reviewed the parking information and has no objection to the proposal. But as the comments further state, the roadways surrounding the location are maintained by SCDOT. Accordingly, SCDOT would make those determinations. No SCDOT traffic study was submitted for consideration to determine the impact of adding a mixed-use development on an already burdened Rosewood Drive, especially if parking is insufficient and results in significant increase in off-street parking and traffic on the streets surrounding the project. How can Boza determine if the application/request meets the minimum criteria for special exception, for example, not substantially adversely affecting traffic, adjoining properties, aesthetic character, or public safety without a CDOT comment? 4, with Publix across the street, the lack of parking spaces for this project will undoubtedly result in guests, invitees, and residents using that parking lot and crossing over Rosewood on foot during the daytime and evening hours to visit the multifamily apartments and the retail/restaurant establishments. The other businesses surrounding the site, including Rosewood Market and Base 10, will likely see an increase in authorized parking requiring the purchase of signs and significantly increased parking lot monitoring/towing and the like. This will create a dangerous situation to travelers on Rosewood, as well as those visiting the proposed development. This impact is detrimental to the surrounding properties and does not meet the minimum criteria of special exception. 4, Sloan Street is a one-block residential street, which will further burden ingress/egress and cause cars to dart across Rosewood when entering and exiting the property. If Rosewood is not used for entering/exiting Sloan Street, this will push traffic onto Burney Drive, a quiet residential street running parallel to the north of Rosewood, which will be overly burdened by this increase in traffic and negatively impact the aesthetics of the Chandler neighborhood. 5, there are no existing large multifamily developments in this area. The most comparable is 1.5 miles away and has only 28 units, but has 28 dedicated parking spaces at 511 Saluda Avenue, which is 76% versus 36% with the proposed project. 6, nothing in the application or case summary indicates a, quote, comprehensive analysis of parking demands by time of day. Section 17-346, shared parking. Shared parking should be encouraged in a mixed-use development, which includes at least 2 uses that have different parking demands, peaking characteristics. Actual reduction for such a project should be determined through a comprehensive analysis, which is underlined. And I'll skip forward to also saying the Board of Adjustment may allow the shared parking reduction as a special exception. And the writer has underlined after submission of a study by the applicant, which has been reviewed by the city traffic engineer. 7, Table B does not reflect any specific percentages of use as to this particular location, or the fact that 15% of the existing 88 parking spaces are on street, not off street as required under section 17-341. And in section 17-341, it reads, permanent off-street parking is required in all districts except the C5 Central Business District Zone. Such parking shall be provided in the amount required by this division at the time of erection, alteration, which is underlined for emphasis, enlargement, establishment, or change in use of any building, which is also underlined. Table A does not comply with the requirements of section 17-342, requiring proposed mixed uses to have at least 66 spaces for residential units that will occupy the 20,000 square foot church that will now be mixed use. And it reads on for section 17-342, referencing where general office or mixed uses are being proposed, a number of off-street parking spaces required shall be 3.3 parking spaces per 1,000 square feet of floor space. 9, Tables A does not indicate any office units, but the application describes the project as a collection of retail, office, restaurant, and residential uses. 10, Table B includes office in the calculation of the percentage of shared usage, which if there is to be no office units, skews the shared parking needs. This is especially important for the weekday evening and weekend evening and nighttime calculations. And there's a chart with the Table A and Table B referenced.
Yeah, and we'll make that part of the record for the board. So we'll provide those charts.
And it looks like I did receive one more email. And it's from Mike Eli. It says, hi, Mike Eli here, homeowner in Rosewood on South Holly Street. We are strongly in favor of the case on development, both the apartments and retail. We need more density along Rosewood, and this centralized location is perfect for that. I don't understand the concerns around parking on Sloan or Bernie in the neighborhood. It seems that a simple solution would be to make the street areas in front of the homeowner properties residential parking only. In addition, putting meters with limits along Sloan in front of the development would encourage parking turnover and free up parking spaces. Passing the exemptions with parking addendums would solve many of these concerns. Also, traffic calming on Sloan and Bernie, including new stop signs and speed humps, would reduce the cut-through traffic that everyone is concerned about. Thank you, Mike. And let me double check, but I believe that concludes the comments.
Has anyone, I got a message that someone had left a comment on the public input site. Did anyone use that chat box to send any comments? Just want to make sure we don't miss anything.
Yeah, and I see that now. There is a comment that says, why wasn't the parking analysis included in the Boza case summary? When did the staff receive the parking analysis, and who performed the parking analysis? And let's see, there's another one. It says the church has already sold the property to the developer. How would the timing of a Boza decision affect the church? And scrolling through here, there's another comment that says the application confirms that the church does not own the property any longer. Whether or not this property gets developed will not impact the church. It seems misleading.
Hey, I'm just going to say, John Gregory on the board, and sorry if I'm out of line, there's 2 properties. One is still owned by the church currently. So I just wanted to address that.
Correct. The property that has the actual church building on it is still owned by the church. Mr. Kaysen owns the one across the street.
Let's see. So here's another comment. It says, if the developer has come to a private agreement with the surrounding property owner, but has not contacted the others, then that confirms to Boza that there are adverse conditions that have not been fully disclosed or resolved, and therefore the applications do not meet the criteria of the special exception. And another comment says a cul-de-sac is also a potential concern. If you need an example of that, take a look at Divine and Holly at happy hour with people driving around and darting across Divine so they can get to and from Henry's and Cantina 76. Another comment says concur with the caller about the church not being harmed if Boza does not approve. And let's see, there's another one that says section 17-346 of the City of Columbia Municipal Ordinance requires a comprehensive analysis of parking demands by time of day. The Board of Adjustment may allow the shared parking reduction as a special exception after submission of a study by the applicant, which has been reviewed by the city traffic engineer. This has not happened, and therefore the Boza is not empowered to approve the parking special exception. Another comment says COVID-19 has shown us that the prior studies of peak times and shared parking do not apply in the shelter-in-place situation. And here's one that says we were told at the beginning of the meeting that comments made here would be read. Please read the comments made here.
They've been read now.
Yeah, and let's see, there is another one that says let's put commercial parking in front of Mike's house. And finally, and I guess this is a good segue, Rachel says, what has become of the emails submitted previous to the meeting?
I have several emails. I was just letting Andrew go first with his batch. I do want to address a couple things before I dive into the emails. A parking summary was provided by the applicant. It was an Excel spreadsheet. It was in the packet. That was reviewed by the city traffic engineer, and he sent an email that was also in the packet, David Brewer, that he had no opposition to the shared parking application. The traffic summary that I showed in the PowerPoint, that was provided to me today, and it was provided to the board today. And also there's mention of a cul-de-sac. Sloan Street, Rosewood, those are DOT maintained streets. We have no purview here to make any conditions or any discussion about closing off Sloan Street or any residential parking on Sloan Street, as that is not a city maintained or owned street. I have several emails. I will dive into those now. Bear with me. I'm sorry, you're gonna have to hear my voice a lot. This letter is from the Rosewood Community Council. The Rosewood Community Council is in favor of both items on the June 4th agenda. Rosewood Council met with Frank Kaysen and discussed the planned development for the former Rosewood Church and adjacent parking lot. The council is excited to see the plans for new development along the Rosewood corridor. We think that this development will be a great addition to the area with smart infill of retail in the former parking lot and apartments geared towards young professionals and empty nesters in the former church and classrooms. Given the centralized location, The council believes that this project will be well received and the apartments and retail will fill a big need for our adjacent in-town neighborhoods. We're very pleased that Kaysen Development plans to reuse the existing buildings and will not tear down the church. We greatly prefer these plans for development over other potential developers who could demolish the church and put up an unneeded large student living complex or hotel. We also are in favor of the parking variance, given that this is such a walkable and bikeable neighborhood location. We think that the shared parking between retail, parentheses daytime, and apartments, parentheses nighttime, provides an efficient use of space and minimizes additional asphalt build out for the project. Please vote yes to get this project underway. Thank you for always listening to us. Please feel free to contact any council members at any time. Sincerely, Rosewood Community Council. The next email is from Joel Copeland. Dear City of Columbia Board of Zoning Appeals, please consider the traffic flow from an apartment complex on the Rosewood Baptist Church property when you have your discussion on Thursday, June 4th, 2020. The plan suggests that access to the apartment complex is only through Sloan Street. The proximity of the traffic light at the intersection of Rosewood Drive and Holly Street and the intersection of Rosewood and Sloan Street makes it difficult to make a left-hand turn onto Rosewood Drive from Sloan Street. A likely alternative route is a turn right onto Sloan Street to get to Holly Street to use the traffic light at that intersection with Rosewood. This increase in traffic would likely impact homes along this route. Thank you for your time, Joel Copeland. All right, the next is from Amy Starr of 3108 Monroe Street. Dear members of the City of Columbia Board of Zoning Appeals, I'm writing to convey to you my surprise and disappointment in learning today, for the first time, that the City of Columbia Board of Zoning Appeals is holding a meeting on whether to grant exceptions being sought by a developer applicant, Frank Kaysen, and to voice my ardent opposition to these exceptions being sought by Mr. Kaysen for the two properties located at 2800 and 2901 Rosewood Drive. I believe that this developer's plans will create a nuisance for the Shandon neighborhood. There's not enough available parking to support 47. Mr. Kaysen intends to utilize the existing structures and not build from the ground up after demolition. The current streets and traffic flow patterns will put an inordinate amount of traffic onto the streets adjacent to these two properties. Overflow parking will also occur on the adjacent streets and properties as necessary due to lack of adequate parking. This is not the appropriate location for a mixed-use development, plus an additional building to be built fronting Rosewood Drive for a restaurant and other businesses. There's simply not enough room or parking. I want to further object to the fact that you're making decisions based on conceptual plans and not firm or final plans. This seems backwards and ludicrous to me. Since these conceptual plans do not include the build out of a parking garage, I must further object. The obvious best and highest use of these existing structures is their future use as another church, mosque, or synagogue. Residents like myself would gladly welcome another church, mosque, or synagogue to our neighborhood. I do not believe that sufficient notice was given to all residents in my neighborhood regarding this issue, having found out myself just a couple of hours ago. I'm disappointed that better efforts were not utilized to convey this information, these appeals to the residents of both Shandon and Rosewood. Finally, I respectfully ask that you read this, my letter of opposition to you all, into the record for these two matters during your meeting this afternoon so that a record is made of my opposition. Sincerely yours, Amy Starr. And this is from, and I do want to apologize if I butcher anyone's names. I apologize in advance. This is from a Kathleen Warthen. To the Board of Zoning Appeals, I'm a resident of Shandon living on Wilmot. I will not reiterate all the good points raised in the many letters you've received in opposition to the Kaysen Group's proposed special exceptions. It is clear that the application to Boza has been made hastily without meeting Boza's own prereqs for approval and without even the most basic notification to adjacent property owners until very recent weeks. I will say that I'm a frequent visitor of Sloan Street and have noted before this controversy that street parking is at a premium in the residential section. There are no sidewalks, no buffer between the road and yards children play in, as there are in parts of the neighborhood with more generous spacing from the street. It is narrow enough that if cars are parked on both sides, only one car can comfortably pass through at a time. Bernie is not much better. My primary concern is the number of people and thus cars this development will place on Sloan Street, spilling out into Shandon. The numbers of parking spots allotted is insufficient. The notion that residents and retail customers simply won't be on the premises at the same time is unlikely to prove true, as many professionals have discovered they can work from home and retirees keep odd hours. It is important to consider the special exception in light of what we have learned from the coronavirus. Residential parking may answer to different factors now than when the zoning code was written. It also assumes the retail establishments won't be open on weekends. Certainly, allowances should not be made to allow even fewer parking spaces than are required by code. I hope that the Kaysen Group will find a way to mitigate the damage by significantly decreasing the number of units, reducing retail plans, and/or scratching plans for building an additional building onto the property that is now a parking lot, or taking other similarly effective measures. Until they can find a way to limit the negative impact on the community, Boza should not approve their prematurely submitted and vaguely defined requests. Respectfully submitted, Kathleen Worthen. And this email is from Aaron Cook, Rachel and Hope and others. I am writing regarding the zoning meeting tomorrow for the Rosewood Baptist Church property. After reviewing the information and hearing from Frank Kaysen in our Shandon neighborhood meeting, I do not believe that this project is appropriate for our neighborhood. While I would welcome more restaurants or retail, putting apartments in the footprint of our neighborhood does not fit our character. We do not need the increased traffic, and the lack of parking spaces for that many apartments would change the neighboring streets to make them less desirable to live in. There's no guarantee that these high-end apartments would not later be changed to lower-end apartments for lack of ability to rent them. Please vote no on this project and do not put a full-blown apartment complex in the heart of Shandon and Rosewood neighborhoods. Aaron A. Cook. And this is from Chase Campalong. Hi, Rachel. I'm writing this email to you today in efforts to cast my support for a mixed-use development on Rosewood Drive, more commonly known as the Rosewood Church redevelopment. The project is being proposed by Kaysen Development Group, a well-known local development group, among other things, led by Frank Kaysen. On May 26th, I attended a CDG, Kaysen Development Group, Shandon Neighborhood, and Shandon Neighborhood Council Zoom meeting, which ultimately ended with council voting unanimously in opposition to the project. As a resident of Shandon, I feel that the neighborhood council didn't truly address the ones in support of the project, instead focused only on property owners who had concerns. It should also be known that groups that were strongly opposed to the project are adjacent to the property. Although you are not the appropriate person to air out my grievances on the matter, I do feel that this letter would be relative to the agenda you all have set for tomorrow morning. Currently, the property is zoned as C3, which, as you all know, can be developed into many different end uses without any discussion from the neighborhood or the board. The Kaysen Group's request is to build a mixed-use project that will incorporate apartments and retail. Not only will this be a catalyst for the Rosewood corridor, but would be a great addition to the Shandon neighborhood. CDG has already expressed their willingness to work with the neighborhood and the council to develop something that'll benefit everyone, not just one group. Not to mention the proposed design is to preserve the current buildings and to be something that is aesthetically complementary to the area, just like Divine Street. Rosewood can be a future family-friendly, safe, and highly desirable destination, and I think developments like this should be encouraged and sought after. The Kaysen Group are the ones that can accomplish that goal and vision while working with local neighborhood representatives and the neighbors who live there, respectively, Chase. And this is from Emile De Felice. Good afternoon, Ms. Bailey. This email is to let you know that I fully support the proposed development on Rosewood and Sloan, and especially admire the adaptive reuse of the existing structures. Urban infill development is exactly where we need to aim in the city, and Mr. Kaysen has a stellar record of that in recent years. I'll go further and say that less parking is better, as there are so many other ways to get around these days. Comet, ride hail, city bike program, and more asphalt is exactly what the city does not need. If potential residents are put off by the parking, they need only look elsewhere. Plenty of options. We live just around the corner and look forward to seeing this get built and to having new neighbors. Thank you, Emile. And this is from Thomas Beard. Rachel, I'm writing this letter in reference to the Boza special exception request brought forth by Kaysen Development Group to allow multifamily on the Rosewood Church parcel and shared parking on both parcels. I'm a resident of Shandon neighborhood and an owner of 3219 Monroe Street. I fully support their vision for the redevelopment of both parcels into a mixed-use development that would become a major improvement to the otherwise unalluring Rosewood Drive. Kaysen Development Group has repeatedly proven to bring vision, creativity, and furtherance to all areas they have been willing to take a risk on, and I believe Shandon, Rosewood, and the surrounding area is very fortunate to have them focused on bringing positive change to this area. I participated on the Zoom call meeting on May 26th with Shandon Neighborhood and Shandon Neighborhood Council, and I, like several others, spoke for several minutes voicing my support for this project. I'm extremely disappointed in the result of that meeting, as I feel as if my comments and those of many others were not taken into account when the council unanimously voted in opposition. Instead, it appeared that the council only considered the opinions of a select few residents who were mostly concerned with the increased traffic that the multifamily component of this development would cause. Even at full capacity, the traffic increase would be minimal and inconsequential. It was also disappointing that council did not acknowledge the very real possibility that these parcels be turned into more general commercial developments, such as car wash, gas station, auto repair, or hotel with little or no city approvals. That would be an enormous lost opportunity for this entire area when considering the alternative that is currently being proposed. Please consider this letter when making your decision. Regards, Thomas Beard. This is from Elizabeth Elijah. Did someone say something?
Yeah, this is Josh. Just out of curiosity, it sounded from that last letter that on that Zoom call that council was in opposition, but people are saying that they were for it. I'm just kind of want some clarity on that Zoom call. I mean, it sounds like there's kind of a split decision on whether council was for it or against it.
I think there was a letter from the council in the packet. Mr. Kaysen can address that. He was at that meeting.
Yeah, I think with that, just to clarify, the letter was not, you guys had the letter, but it was not in opposition. I believe what it said was they requested a deferral. And I have had many conversations with John Meyer, the president, who has tried to tell as many people as he can, both for and against the project, that the neighboring council did not vote to oppose it. They made a vote to send a letter to defer it. I sense his frustrations were that it was unanimous vote to defer it, not, and some felt like their votes in favor of it or their comments in favor of it were not heard. That's all I can say.
Yes, the letter from Mr. Myers is about 5 or 6 letters from the end of your packet. And yes, at a special meeting of the Shandon Neighborhood Council on May 26th, the council voted to direct the president of the council to send a letter to Boza adopting the zoning committee's recommendations and stating the following. 1, the council does not endorse either special exception application, and 2, request that Boza either defer or remove from its June 4th, 2020 agenda its consideration of the special exception applications to enable the council and residents to work with Mr. Kaysen to resolve any outstanding issues. Oh, and I'm sorry, you all, I'm gonna have to mute myself for a second and take a drink of water before I read the rest of these emails.
We appreciate you, Rachel. Thank you.
All right, here we go. All right, this is from Elizabeth Elijah. To whom it may concern, my apology for this last minute correspondence to Boza, and I'll therefore be brief. I've been a resident of the Shandon neighborhood for over 35 years. I'm sending this in opposition to the special exception application purposed multifamily use within a commercial district application of Mr. Frank Kaysen, as well as opposing the special exception to permit a shared parking arrangement within a mixed-use development. Also, I'm asking Boza to consider deferring the aforementioned applications from today's agenda. Concerns: an adequate number of parking spaces for purpose residents, and I think it's for proposed residents and or their guests, even when considering a shared parking arrangement. Increased traffic, parentheses, vehicle and foot, within the Shandon neighborhood community, especially Sloan Street, Burney Drive, Maple Street, Holly Street, Woodrow and Hayward Street, and Shandon Street. safety of children playing on the neighboring streets, safety of individuals crossing over Rosewood to access Publix, the Shannon neighborhood and surrounding areas in close proximity to the neighborhood becoming satiated with housing in the form of apartment complexes. By the way, property value in the Shannon neighborhood is quite good, and I do not believe a multifamily use would add to the value of our properties, nor do I feel it is needed. Thank you in advance for your time and consideration to this important matter. Respectfully submitted, Elizabeth Elijah. And this is from Thomas Mann. To the board, after having a discussion with Frank Kaysen, I would like to submit my opposition to the development of the Rosewood Church property as planned. My opposition is based on the concept of shared parking. Knowing that you can prove anything with statistics, I do not see this idea working at all. Residents may have 2 cars, multifamily work from home, not work at all, or be a student. It's unrealistic to think all residents will work a 9-to-5 shift. If conservatively, each single bedroom resident has 1 car and each 2-bedroom own 2 cars, that's 75 spaces needed for residents, with only 38 spaces around the apartments and a need for 37 additional spaces. Shared parking works only if residents and customers follow rules and behavior patterns. Who's the enforcer of the shared parking concept? My safety concern is that if no parking is readily available, residents, customers will park all down Sloan Street, Burney Drive, and over into Publix. I've witnessed jaywalking to and from Publix in this area and actually watched a highway patrol stop an individual in order to issue a citation for this unsafe act. My fear is that with the increase in people, shared parking, and human nature, more jaywalking will occur. I personally know Frank Kaysen and know that he's done work in Columbia that is an improvement. However, this project of 47 apartments, I believe, reaches too far. I would welcome reputable retail business restaurant with townhomes owned by individuals, but not 47 rented apartments that bring parking and safety issues concerns. Therefore, as presented, I am opposed. Sincerely, Thomas Mann. And this is from James Blake Atkins. Dear Boza, this email serves as my comments on the 2 referenced applications for special exceptions by Kaysen Development Group. As co-chair of the Shannon Neighborhood Council, I strongly support the SNC's statement of no support of both applications. However, my comments below are made on my behalf and do not represent the Neighborhood Council. My comments are: 1, the application should be denied outright due to absence of information required under Division 3 of the city's zoning ordinance. These deficiencies were summarized in the comments submitted by Adam Shore, PhD, among others. Both applications contain no data or analysis and are merely speculative. The Boza cannot make a finding to approve these applications without required information. If approved, the possibility of an appeal becomes highly probable. 2, in the alternative, as a member of the Neighborhood Council and as a Neighborhood Council appointee to the neighborhood group working on this project, I've urged Mr. Kaysen to request a deferral. This would allow a reasonable time for Mr. Kaysen to provide the information required on the applications and to work collaboratively with the neighborhood. Mr. Kaysen failed to adequately communicate with the Neighborhood Council and neighbors as strongly suggested by the zoning staff prior to submitting these applications. It's only been in the 11th hour that he's attempted to work with us after understanding the amount of disagreement on this project. The project that proposed is questionable due to the large number of rental units, many of which will be only 500 square feet in size. He stated this will attract young professionals and empty nesters. Based on my understanding of current rental markets in Columbia, this arrangement will only attract students. This proposed density is creating the unnecessary need for a parking special exception and concerns over traffic and negative impacts to the adjoining residential homes. Number 5, based on the simple site plan submitted with this application, Mr. Kaysen has not proposed or will be able to meet the provisions of the existing zoning regarding buffer yards and tree protection. His applications fail to demonstrate any consideration to meet such requirements. As such, he will need to receive variances from Boza for such protections when he submits his site plan to zoning and attempts to obtain the required building permits. Based on this fact alone, Mr. Kaysen should request a deferral or Boza should deny both applications. Number 6, the goals and intent of the Planning Department and City Council through the development of new form-based codes is for these parcels to be neighborhood mixed use. Millions of dollars in consultant and staff time have gone into formulating the new zoning. I support the new zoning classification and the increased protections it will provide to the neighborhood. Unfortunately, Mr. Kaysen is attempting to do an end run on these new standards since the pandemic has delayed City Council's approval of the map amendments. Number 7, Mr. Kaysen has submitted these applications to Boza based on his current development plans. However, after visiting the site and touring the church buildings, the development plans could be modified to create an improved outcome for him in the neighborhood. As a research engineer, I spent most of my 38-year career conducting simulation and optimization analysis looking for improved outcomes and solutions. With some imagination and analysis, this project could be a significant component of the redevelopment of this area and could easily meet the proposed new zoning for this site. Thank you for consideration of his comments. James Blake Atkins. And I had sent you all previously the letters from Matthew Myers and Mr. and Mrs. Sylvester. Matthew Myers sent an addendum to his letter, so I'm going to read just the addendum since the full letters were provided to you previously. Dear members of the board, this is written as an addendum to my letter dated June 1st. Since that time, I've spoken with Frank Kaysen about his proposed projects in more detail. There are 2 ideas that, if implemented, I would be willing to withdraw my opposition to the project. 1, severing buffering Sloan Street just below the last single-family building so that new tenants, guests, customers, and employees would not be able to drive into Shandon from Sloan Street, and with the lower portion dedicated to the developer owner as a private road so that they could reconfigure it for additional parking. 2, reserving at an absolute minimum 1 parking spot per residential unit to the exclusive use of each residence, while also maintaining the standard parking otherwise required for the commercial activities. Anything less is certain to create livability problems for the tenants themselves, which will therefore burden neighboring residents and properties. Unfortunately, I believe the first item is beyond the control of both the developer and Boza. However, I would also be willing to withdraw my opposition to the project if the reserved residential parking were increased to 1 spot per tenant, while still maintaining the standard parking required for the commercial activities, which amount could automatically be reduced to 1 spot per unit if and when approval for the first item was obtained. This would provide the developer an incentive to see the Sloan Street severance through to completion, but help limit the increased traffic into Shandon, even if not ultimately successful. Thank you again for your public service. With warm regards, I am Matthew Myers. And that is all. Andrew, did you have anything come in during that time?
Rachel, yes, I do have a few new callers, and I also have some more comments that came in. I can read those comments first and then continue to the callers.
Okay.
I apologize, I need to scroll down to it again. Okay, so the first comment I have not read says, the contract for the remaining church parcel is not contingent on zoning, so there is no, quote, timing, unquote, constraint for Boza approval and no harm to the church if Boza does not approve. Then there's 2 comments that are copied from prior ones. They've already been read, so I will skip those. There is another comment that says, you are reading a statement from the Rosewood Neighborhood Council, but this development is not in Rosewood, it is in Shandon. Then another comment says, the parking analysis shown today, but that is not included in the case summary, is not comprehensive, so the requirements of section 17-346 have not been met. Also, the third party who performed the parking analysis mentioned today was not revealed. Please provide to the public the full parking analysis, including the name of the engineer who performed it, along with the date the city traffic engineer reviewed and approved it. And there's 2 more comments. One says, Boza should not subjectively try to figure out what the Shandon Neighborhood Council vote means based on one letter that did not agree with that vote. And the final comment says, there's a Shandon Neighborhood Council and a Rosewood Neighborhood Council. And then, as I stated, I do have 2 callers that have indicated they wish to speak.
Okay.
And I'll connect the first one now.
Hey guys, can you hear me?
Yes.
This is Mo Badura. I pretty much know most of you guys, and just want to kind of give you my feedback a little bit about what I've been hearing in the neighborhood and around the project. Just to clarify some issues or some misunderstanding, I did attend the Shandon Neighborhood Council meeting last Monday, 10 days ago. And the first motion that was made, it was made by one of the council members to oppose the project. And through the discussion period, they removed that motion, or the person who made that motion withdrew that motion to adjust it where they can ask for a delay and vote, delay on for you guys to vote on this variance this meeting. And that's why, there was a little bit of confusion back and forth with that. The other thing is, I've been hearing a lot of opposition from the neighbors that are affected by this project, especially on Sloan Street and Bernie and Holly and Maple. And it's not a good side. They're all worried about the amount of traffic that it's going to increase and the quality of life it's going to affect. I just heard it today that, and I don't know Frank, I have nothing against him. But it seems like somebody's going around to different neighbors around the Sloan Street and Bernie Street and trying to make deals with each one, or trying to make a deal with different neighbor to satisfy their concern, rather than worry about what is the best interest for the whole corridor or the whole area and the Shandon neighborhood. And that being said, I don't live far from the project. I've always thought that Rosewood can always use some retail spots. But from the people that live on Sloan Street and on Holly Street, on Bernie, are not comfortable with that much traffic coming in and that much noise that's coming into their neighborhood and their backyard. So as a resident of Shandon who is aware of trying to balance a lot of the development and the concerns of the neighbors, for me, this is not a good project for you all to approve or even consider at this time, because there's still a lot of concerns, a lot of questions not being answered. And we all know the cul-de-sac has been kind of talked about a couple of times. It's a DOT road. Rosewood is a DOT road. It's going to be really hard for the city or anybody to approve the cul-de-sac. And that's why, and more and more reason why, a vote should be delayed this meeting until we get more detail into what if the cul-de-sac is even possible, and how you're going to handle the traffic that's going into Bernie and Sloan and Holly and Maple, and in general, just in Shandon neighborhood. The problem with the other problem with the project is when you go up to Sloan, you can't take a left, you got to go right. So a lot of the traffic, and I'm not a traffic engineer, I'm just talking from common sense, that would go back to Bernie and Holly and Sloan, and which is really not what the neighborhood wants, or the neighbor who lives, or the neighbors that live on that cul-de-sac or that area would want. For that, I've probably taken my 3 minutes, and I just want to appreciate all the hard work you guys are doing. I know this is a hard position to make, and I've been there and I know how that is, and I'm sure you're going to do the right thing. So for that, I'll leave it alone, and thank you guys for your time.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, and now the next speaker.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I'm John Myers, president of the Shandon Neighborhood Council, and I just listening to the call, and I just wanted to call in and offer some clarification. As you know, the council met and we had a 2.5-hour Zoom meeting. And during that meeting, we heard from Frank and every resident that wanted to speak. And at the conclusion of that discussion, the council took up the matter as to how to proceed, and ultimately voted unanimously not to endorse either application because the council concluded there were insufficient facts to assess whether the criteria for a special exception were met. In particular, how increased traffic and the parking needs of renters and shoppers created by the project affected Shandon. And in listening to the discussion today, the best analogy I could give is, a responsible parent doesn't just hand their kids the keys to the car and give the child carte blanche to use the car as they see fit. They ask questions. Why do you need the car? Where are you going? What time are you getting home? Well, when you know all the facts, you can make an informed decision on whether you can let your child use the car. So likewise, Boza should, in the council's view, as it concluded, perhaps shouldn't hand Mr. Kaysen the keys to this project through these special exceptions without knowing all the relevant facts, in particular, what are the parking and traffic implications of the project. The second observation that I would make is some residents have voiced the opinion that the council is opposed to the project, which, as you know, calls for 47 apartments and about 8,000 square feet of retail space. As Mr. Kaysen noted, the council didn't express an opinion one way or the other on the merits of these combinations. And that's simply because the council didn't know what impact such a proposal would have on the Shandon neighborhood. And we can all agree that the council would likely agree to an apartment building with 10 units and a site across the street with a few shops. At the same time, my guess is the council wouldn't approve a 150-unit apartment building and 25 establishments crammed in across the street. So, the question is, Mr. Kaysen's proposal falls somewhere between these two examples, but without all the relevant facts, which many callers have recognized require impact studies. The council concluded that they just didn't know whether the implications as it related to traffic and parking were manageable. And finally, the third observation I would make is this whole process resulted in an agreement between the Shores and Mr. Kaysen. It sort of begs the question, how are the other residents around this development, how are they going to enforce kind of a side agreement between Mr. Kaysen and the Shores? So that kind of lends itself to the final point of the council, which was to defer consideration of this to explore these outcomes. And the last thing that I want to say is Mr. Kaysen is the man for this job. There's no doubt about it. He has done wonderful work in the city. He's engaged all of the residents. He's met with us. He's taken all of my calls. We've had very fruitful discussions. And it's my hope that we can continue to meet and find an outcome that we can all live with. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and there is another speaker as well. Here you go.
Hey guys, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Hey, sorry, I was a little bit on a delay on the video. Sorry, it's delaying now again. So my name is Matt Markham. I'm calling on behalf of the Greater Rosewood Merchants Association. I just wanted to speak in favor of and give a little bit of insight to our decision to support. A couple things that stick out to me are, I think a lot of these issues we would hope as we're trying to see the corridor grow and increase our membership and make it a better place to do business and to also live happily and quietly in a neighborhood as the neighbors rightfully so want. I think for this particular parcel, these issues are probably going to be a problem regardless of how it develops. And to further back that up, I think Frank has proven that there are solutions to a lot of the issues that have been raised. And I think it is natural to be a little bit distrustful of a potential developer to stick to their word or to solve problems once they've kind of been given permission to do something. But from all accounts that we've been able to find, as far as, trying to fact find and get, further information about Frank's character, we see some solutions to these issues, and we certainly don't want to be putting out the community around us just to blindly go for increased development. But I think there are ample solutions to the problems. I think that some of these problems are going to exist regardless of the development, and that it might not necessarily be fair to single them out on Frank's specific, given that there are so many opportunities to change it and make it better for everybody involved. So after talking to Bob as well, we also definitely wanted to see respectfully so that we don't lose an opportunity to maintain the historic value of the building. I know it's not technically classified as historic, but it definitely represents something to the community. And from our position, we thought there might be an increased risk of losing that if we weren't able to get something developed as Frank has it set forth. But anyways, thank you guys for your time, and appreciate it.
Thank you.
And Rachel, as of right now, I do not have any speakers or any callers that have indicated they wish to speak, and I'm double checking the messages, but I believe we've run through all of them.
All right, and I'll ask Chuck, do you want to move into the applicant rebuttal period?
Yes, please.
All right, we'll move into that. Mr. Kaysen?
But before we do that, are we going to come back and have additional calls come back in, or we go to board discussion after that?
That is up to you.
Okay.
If you want to take more comment after the rebuttal period, or if you would like to go ahead and move into board discussion at that time.
I would like to do that, I believe. I think we've heard both sides of it pretty well. I just don't want to spend another hour having the same thing regurgitated back out and forth. I think we'll hear that and then go straight into board discussion.
That's what we normally do. So yeah.
Okay.
All right, Mr. Kaysen?
Thank you. Now I get 5 minutes per email, is that right?
No.
Sorry. Thank you. As you probably imagine, we've heard a lot of that. I thought I'd just try to go through some of those things to give some clarity and additional explanation on. A couple people mentioned the cul-de-sac. I recognize, and I think the whole neighborhood recognizes that you all can't necessarily make a decision on that or based on that. Just for information, we have discussed that with that idea was brought up by some Sloan Street residents. Councilman Brennan was on that call, and Councilman Duvall as well. Both endorsed that and said, well, we can begin work on that and exploration on it, which we did. 2 days later, we had a conference call with 8 people, I think, from the city. And the short version was it's possible. They would say probable in this scenario, but a lengthy process. 12 plus months was given there. So I think I would say that everyone I've talked to and shared that with has been understanding that we can't hold the project up for that long, but one of the things and one of the reasons why I'm going to transition that into discussion on the agreement that was mentioned, and some mentioned it in sort of a sketchy way. We started having discussions with neighbors about that and saying we are happy to continue the discussions on that. They appropriately said, how do we know that? As someone said, they can't just rely on trusting us. So our attorney and Kathleen, who was on the call earlier, our understanding was that she was, although she was hired by the Shores, was also that the Shores had been talking to a number of the residents on Sloan and Bernie. That fact we have, I know it's been confirmed from other residents that they have been in communication, and many of them are supposed to be a part of that agreement as well. So it's not an agreement with just the Shores. It was attempted to be an agreement with multiple people and owners on that street. It does address things like landscape buffers and additional screenings and fencing, etc. The shared parking, it was brought up a couple of times. Don't get again where we got that from was the ULI study. We based those numbers from that. We didn't create those numbers. We pulled those from those who know much more than us. And also, I forgot to start by saying the apartments are 1 and 2 bedroom apartments targeted at young professionals and aging baby boomers and empty nesters. We're not changing the exterior of these buildings. We're repurposing the buildings with the desire to give new life, bring new life to them. No more case studies around the country of converting churches to nice apartment units. So this is not something brand new, and we hope to take the existing sanctuary and respect it with a sensitive renovation. There was a comment, but one email about that they agreed with the Leah Dover and Shore letter, and just to clarify that, Leah Dover and Shore, who they said they agree with all the points on that long letter was written by the Shores, and they are represented by Kathleen, who began the call and said they support the project now. Rachel, correct me on this, but someone mentioned that they said that we're in the community character district. I do not believe that's accurate, with the exception of the little finger that goes back behind the property.
Correct. Yeah, only that small portion of the property is within community character. So it doesn't encompass the actual buildings. Anything that's C3 is not in the community character.
Okay, thank you. Someone mentioned that we didn't include the types of residential units or the heights shown or the buildings. They're the existing buildings, 2 stories. You've seen the site plan actually shows 2-story building on the front, new retail building, and then you've seen the rendering for that as well. We talked about the Shannon Neighborhood Council. We've had a lot of people reach out to us in the discussions. Some frustrated that we recognize that in any project we do, those closest proximity are the most immediately impacted, and then you've got the neighborhoods that sort of go out from there. Someone made this comment to us in the process that it's not just Shandon. We do feel that we are a part of that and are proud to be a part of that. It's Rosewood Merchants Association. We're on the Rosewood corridor. We're on Rosewood Street, which means we are not far from Rosewood community as well. And obviously we have letters of support from both of those bodies, and are appreciative of that, but there's more than just one neighborhood. Hopefully I've addressed Mo Badura's comments about these side deals being made. We've had discussions with neighbors. I said that at the beginning, and as we've had these discussions, they've asked how they can get us to commit to them, and so we've attempted to put together one's just a 1-page document that says we're going to do some landscaping things. So there was a comment that Mo Badura made about not being able to take a left on Rosewood. You can take a left from Sloan onto Rosewood. Someone made a comment about working with the neighbors and potentially that stopping if we just get approval. We've got a long ways to go on this project, and an approval here does not stop our working with the neighborhoods. And I recognize that some of that might fall on deaf ears, but this is the beginning of that in our eyes. So it is a C3, as Mr. Markham mentioned, and many people have asked things that we can do here. I don't think we need to bring that up to this body, as everyone's probably very well aware of that. So with that, I'll leave it for questions from Boza.
Any questions from the board?
Frank, appreciate it, man. Can you just highlight next steps for this? Say we make a motion here to do this, just for everybody listening and for the board. Can you highlight what y'all's next steps are? I mean, y'all still have to get DOT approvals. Can you just highlight what else y'all need to do to get this, to break ground on this, I guess, just so everybody knows?
Yes, thank you. There's a lot we have done. What is seen or is designed, so we have to go through a full design process on site, on landscaping, and then interiors as well. We're repurposing the existing buildings, so not changing any locations there, but there's a lengthy design process that goes through that. Those then are submitted to multiple departments at the City of Columbia. The City of Columbia reviews every aspect of this project, to include traffic and parking. This is a DOT road currently, so it will go before DOT as well to get our access permits. So that's an overview. There's a lot that goes into this after this process that is all reviewed by the municipality. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I guess I was just trying to highlight that, just decision made here. There's still a lot of work to be done. Just sort of trying to highlight that.
So in this, the church property with the more than 5 residential units will go to Planning Commission for site plan review as well. So.
Anybody else?
I have a question for Rachel. So in the letter that was sent to us via email from Matthew Myers, you read the addendum.
Yes.
He has a portion of that letter where he's trying to say that, make a distinction between shared parking and remote parking. Can you speak to that?
Remote parking per the ordinance is basically off-site parking. So under remote parking in the ordinance, that comes into deed restricted parking, which is when somebody deed restricts another parcel to provide parking for their parcel. So It might be one across the street, it might be one adjacent, but it's deed restricted to have parking specifically for that other parcel.
That's right.
There's also leased parking, which leased parking is when you have a formal lease that is reviewed by zoning and by the Board of Zoning Appeals. It is also a special exception for that leased parking. And that is a formal agreement, again, signed by both parties. And through the code, it requires that the parking be specifically designated to the use that is leasing it. So it has some signage requirements and things like that. Shared parking is a different code section from the remote parking sections of the ordinance. So with remote parking, with the deed restricted and the leased parking, those can only be for non-residential uses. and they have to be within 400 feet. Shared parking does not have the same restriction against residential uses. It can go for just a mixed use development as a whole. Does that help at all?
It does. I was just curious about the intersection between the idea of shared parking and two lots, two separate parcels separated by a street.
Shared parking comes in when it's a cohesive mixed use development.
Okay.
So it does just have to be, it has to have at least two different uses. And also I wanted to kind of going off of that, I know some people expressed concern about the comprehensive parking study. That is not necessarily a traffic study. The ordinance is also pretty vague as to what would make a comprehensive parking study. It's kind of up to the board to determine if you have that information, if you've received the information that you need for a comprehensive parking study. The parking engineer did review it. His email was in the packet. It's from Tuesday, May 19th. He reviewed the full application, which had that Excel spreadsheet, which was their parking study that they submitted. His remark to me was, I have no objection to the proposed shared use parking. So that was his statement to me, and that's in the packet from the traffic engineer.
So I've got a question, I think, for Frank. It looks like in the site plan there are 13 on-street parking spaces on Sloan Street that are between the two parcels of land. Is that part of the spaces that you're counting, or are those just additional on-street parking spaces?
So we are, Rachel, correct me if that, we're not allowed to count that in our application.
Correct.
But we are counting them in our calculations, and in large part, we've done a lot of studying and thinking on that, and standing on that street, as funny as that sounds, has been a large part of that. If you can, as you can tell in the site plan, those parking spaces, with the exception of 3, are all sandwiched in between these two commercial parcels, and felt that they would be largely used by these parcels. We also, and I know no decisions can be made on this, but we looked at for reference what the new code provides for, and it provides for using on-street parking in your calculations as well. I know we can't make any decisions on that, and that has not been, the map has not been approved. Rachel's gonna scold me for bringing it up, but that was part of our thoughts, and that a lot of people have asked and even implied that we're trying to slide this in before that new zoning code. And I think most people on Boza know that it would be an easier process for us if we did wait. We wouldn't have to have a special exception for multifamily, and the parking would be a different conversation.
So, and I can speak to that, and Frank is right. We're not supposed to make any decisions based on an ordinance that is not effective. But the proposed ordinance for the future does have a mixed use zoning over this area. Frank would not be before the board for either special exception under the new ordinance. So some of the accusations that he is slipping in under the wire under this ordinance, it's actually kind of the reverse. This ordinance is more restrictive.
Excellent. Okay.
Hey, I do have another question for Frank. I mean, the one concern I have here is just public safety, Frank, just with the pedestrians and whatnot. I mean, and I don't know what y'all have looked at and how far down the road y'all have gone from a design standpoint, but as far as just pedestrian controls or anything like that, have y'all given any thought to talking to DOT about some sort of pedestrian crosswalk that's lit up that you see on Millwood, for example? Have y'all talked to them about that from the Publix to Sloan Street?
That's a great point. We've had a lot of discussions about that, not with DOT, as you probably know well. DOT is not great at just preliminary discussions. They typically need a full submittal, but with our engineer, we absolutely have had those discussions on what can be done there. A lot of people brought up the issues with crossing over from Sloan to the Publix. If you can see in this site plan on the bottom right of Holly, there is a crosswalk and a traffic signal, and there's also one at the next intersection down where Rosewood, it's Rosewood Market. There's one intersection down as well. So we're certainly willing to look into that more, and have had a lot of discussions on that.
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking out loud. I mean, this is and one of the last callers said it. It was I think the guy who's over the Rosewood Greater Merchants Association. But if you look at this parcel, and this kind of gets into discussion, so I'm not going to get that much into it. I'll let make sure that we don't have any more questions for you. But it's just the way the church is laid out on that parcel. It's hard to fit all the parking in there as is. So I just think we've got to be able to think as a community about how to best adaptive reuse of this parcel and what we can do with it. And Chuck, that's kind of more board discussion, I guess. But
that's a great and actually it's exactly to the point of why we're presenting the shared parking proposal here, so those structures can be adaptively reused while maintaining them while using and utilizing the parking on the other side.
Right now on the parcel, there's no parking.
That's right. There's zero. Yeah.
I mean,
zero.
So for somebody to come in and someone mentioned, what about another church? Well, I mean, the property's built for sale. Other churches could have bought it. The business guy for the church even said that their population's gone down to 60. So I think the market has proven that maybe a church is not the highest and best use for that location. So I just, this is getting into board discussion, but yeah, I mean, I think there's going to have to be some sort of give and take, and that's why some of these adaptive reuse developments are not easy to do.
Okay, it's 6:20. Can we move to board discussion, or does anybody else have another question for Frank? If I don't hear one, I think let's go ahead and move into board discussion on the prospect. And I think that the appropriate venue right now would be to take the first special exception, which is the multifamily and the commercial zoning. I guess we can talk about them both together, but I guess that'll be the first one we vote on, and then the second one will be the shared parking.
Correct. Yeah, multifamily and then the shared parking.
Okay. Is anybody else got anything?
Yeah, I'd like to start, Chuck. Apologize, my camera is not working today. This is Gene. Been listening to all these different comments and weighing all the different issues. And I guess I'd just like to start by pointing out, we've touched on it briefly, that this is a parcel that's currently zoned C3 general commercial. And that is a relatively intense zoning district where you can put uses such as auto parts stores or bowling alley and car wash hotels, et cetera. So it is a fairly intensive zoning district. Looking at this particular location, you've got the heavily developed commercial Rosewood Drive to the south, and then your very family-friendly walkable Shandon neighborhood to the north. So looking at all this, I think the developer's proposal does a very nice job of blending the two distinctly different residential and commercial areas together. I think this plan provides a really good transition between the adjacent commercial corridor and the single-family Shandon neighborhood. Another factor I'd like to point out is that I think this is relevant to this discussion. The other boundary of Shandon to the north, Divine Street, has many different mixed-use type developments, restaurants, apartments, retail stores, and I view this southern boundary of Shandon sort of in the same light. You know, Rosewood Drive it's got some differences in Divine Street, but I view them as being comparable. I think one of the nice things about living in Shandon, which I do, and my wife and our little baby, we do live in Shandon, so this affects me more than just being on the board. I do live in this neighborhood. It's being able to walk to these types of developments in close proximity to your home. I think this is a good location for this development and be a real asset to the area. And, you know, just lastly, I just point out that I can't think of a better transition between these two distinctly different districts than this mixed-use project with some apartments transitioning to your single-family dwellings, potential retail and restaurants. So I am in favor of this development and think he's done a really good job with it.
Okay.
I'll say something. So I would agree with everything that Gene just said. I also want to acknowledge that I really do understand and empathize with the people who live in this area who are concerned about how this type of densification along Rosewood is going to impact sort of the neighborhood feel. And I'm saying that from the perspective of somebody who lives in Cottontown and who, you know, that's a neighborhood that's sandwiched between Bull Street, Elmwood, and Main Street. So we have a lot of pressure in terms of vehicular traffic on our community. And we've also seen a lot of recent development, much of which Frank has done really quite well. But and I would say as a homeowner in that district that I think the property values of my home have gone up because of the type of sensitive adaptive reuse that Frank has done in adjacent to Cottontown. I will also say that there's a lot more traffic and there's a lot more on-street parking as a result of just the pressure. So I just want to, I don't believe that the amount of traffic and on-street parking will have a substantial adverse impact on the neighborhood. But I do want to acknowledge that it is real and is likely to happen, because I think as a board, we can't just pretend like those concerns magically go away with a table that tells us otherwise. I think it does make common sense that there are going to be more cars going down Sloan Street and adjacent streets. And I think that you're going to see more cars parking on the street because of this development. Having said that, I agree that, in my view, that the application meets all of the criteria for the special exception.
Well said. Is there any other comments for discussion? Hearing none, I would like to propose a motion on the for the special exception for multifamily development in the commercial district. That based on the written application and the testimony that we've heard today, that the applicant has proven that this does meet the criteria for a special exception. And that I recommend, I am making a motion to approve this application subject to the comments of staff.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a first, I think George was the second on that, and all in favor? Or do you want to do this by roll call?
I'll do it by roll call.
Okay.
All right, Mr. Sally?
Yes.
Mr. Dinkins?
Yes.
Mr. Primus?
Yes.
Mr. Speed?
Yes.
Mr. Schaefer?
Yes.
Mr. Gregory?
Yes.
All right, and Ms. Stevens is recused. All right, motion passes. The next item is the special exception for the shared parking for the mixed-use development.
I would like to go ahead and make a motion also to also approve this application, and that approval based on the written application and the testimony that we've heard today that this does meet the requirements for the special exception, and that this approval would be subject to the comments of staff in the application.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a version on
Roll
the table,
call.
Rachel. Okay.
Mr. Sally,
Aye.
Mr. Dinkins,
Yes.
Mr. Primus,
Yes.
Mr. Speed,
Yes.
Mr. Schaefer,
Yes.
and Mr. Gregory.
Yes.
And again, Ms. Stevens is recused. All right, the motion passes.
Very good.
So, and there is no other business on the agenda. So I believe, though, Mr. Gregory just recently got married. So I wanted to congratulate him.
Thank you. Thank you.
During other business.
Congratulations.
Very good. Congratulations, John.
So I saw that in your out of office message. So, but again, no other business unless you all had anything. And if not, you're welcome to move forward with a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Gregory, since you're the married man, why don't you make a motion for us?
Yep. My new wife would appreciate that. I make a motion to adjourn.
I second that. All in favor, say aye.
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 We are now adjourned. Thanks, everybody. Thanks,
All
Rachel.
right. Take
Thanks,
care,
all
everyone.
staff.
Thank you.
Thanks,
All
Andrew.
right. Bye-bye.
Very good. Thank you.